Here are the top 5 most ironic deaths of all time. From the man who fell to his death while trying to prove a skyscraper window was unbreakable to the anti-seatbelt activist killed in a car accident, these tragic deaths were anything but expected. Death is an unfortunate, often tragic, reality of life. Of course, not everyone dies in the same way. Sometimes, they suffer horrific, agonizing deaths. Other times, they die peacefully in their sleep. But among the countless deaths throughout recorded history, there are a few that stand out for how bitterly ironic they were. Number 1. The mysterious death of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe. He was one of America's most influential writers. His stories were often dark, macabre, and sprinkled with an eerie sense of dread and mystery. He was known for tales such as The Telltale Heart and The Mask of the Red Death, but the circumstances surrounding Poe's death seemed like something out of one of his own stories. Edgar Allan Poe's life was plagued with tragedy, up until the very moment he died. Edgar Allan Poe died of unknown causes on October 7, 1849, after he was found delirious on the streets of a city in which he did not live, wearing clothes that weren't his, and babbling so incoherently that he could not explain how he came to be in the situation. Poe, whose life was plagued with tragedy, was a known alcoholic. Many have theorized that this disease was what ultimately led to his death, but not all historians are convinced, and to this day, no official explanation has ever been determined. Poe had left his home in Richmond, Virginia, on September 27, 1849. He was bound for Philadelphia to edit a friend's poetry collection. But Poe never made it to Philadelphia, and he somehow wound up in Baltimore. When he was next seen 6 days later, he was lying in a gutter outside a local pub wearing someone else's heavily soiled clothing, per Smithsonian Magazine. For the next 4 days, Poe was racked with fever dreams and vivid hallucinations. He frequently called out for a man named Reynolds. Although many initially believed that Poe's drinking led to his demise, a physician who tested Poe's hair after his death claimed that the author may not have had a sip of alcohol in months. Other experts eventually ruled out other theories, including influenza and rabies. Perhaps it's fitting that one of history's greatest mystery writers died a mysterious death, or perhaps it is bitterly ironic. Number 2. John Kendrick. The captain killed by a cannon fired in his honor. John Kendrick was an adventurer through and through. He began sailing with his father at just 14 years old, and by the age of 20, he was a well-respected sailor in the booming whaling industry of mid-1700s Massachusetts. When he was 22, Kendrick served in the French and Indian War, but the revolutionary spirit soon took hold of him. 10 years later, Kendrick was one of the Sons of Liberty who dumped British tea into the Boston harbor. According to historic mysteries, Kendrick commanded several ships during the American Revolution before returning home in 1778 a full-fledged war hero. After the war, Kendrick returned to his life on the New England coast, working in the whaling and shipping businesses. With various new trade routes opening between the Western world and the East, Kendrick put his naval skills to use and made numerous journeys across the sea to trade goods. After a 14-month stay in Macau that ended in 1794, Kendrick docked in present-day Honolulu, Hawaii. The next morning, to celebrate the victory, Kendrick ordered his men to fire a 13-gun salute. A British ship called the Jackal that had assisted Kendrick's men in battle returned the salute with a cannon volley. Unfortunately, no one on the Jackal had bothered to check if the cannons were loaded, and Kendrick's Lady Washington was struck with grapeshot when the weapons fired. Kendrick was killed as he ate breakfast in his cabin as a result of the Jackal returning the salute that Kendrick himself had ordered. 3. John Sedgwick. The general shot just moments after claiming he couldn't be shot. General John Sedgwick was a career soldier, but he is better remembered for his infamous last words than for his military accolades. Sedgwick was wounded several times during the Civil War. During the 7 Days Battle, for instance, he sustained injuries to his arm and leg at Glendale. At the Battle of Antietam, he was shot 3 times, once in the wrist, once in the leg, and once in the shoulder. Just 90 days later, he reported back for duty. Sedgwick was, if nothing else, a confident man. And this confidence ultimately led to his downfall. On May 8, 1864, When General Ulysses S. Grant sent Union forces to Spotsylvania County to meet Robert E. Lee's army on the battlefield, Sedgwick answered the call to action. He led his men to Spotsylvania Courthouse, bringing the total number of Union soldiers present to nearly 100,000, for the American Battlefield Trust. The next evening, on May 9, Sedgwick was inspecting his line and directing artillery placements. Meanwhile, Confederate sharpshooters were firing rounds from barely 3,000 feet away. Naturally, the Union soldiers facing the onslaught of bullets were ducking for cover. Sedgwick did not approve of this. "What? Men dodging this way for single bullets?" he reportedly asked. "What will you do when they open fire along the whole line?" To set his men's minds at ease, Sedgwick said his infamous final words: "They couldn't hit an elephant at that distance." At that very moment, a Confederate sharpshooter's bullet struck him dead. 4. Gary Hoy, the lawyer who fell out of a window while trying to prove it was unbreakable. Gary Hoy was a successful and respected corporate and securities attorney at the Toronto-based law firm Hold'em Day Wilson. He was even described by managing partner Peter Lowers as one of the best and brightest lawyers at the firm. Gary Hoy was also highly impressed with the windows at the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower, where his office was located. On July 9, 1993, Hoy decided to show off the window's strength for a group of law students who were interested in apprenticeships at the firm, according to Snopes. Hoy actually had a favorite party trick, one that he had performed numerous times before, throwing himself at the windows to prove they wouldn't break. In fact, he'd already performed this little stunt once on the morning of July 9. Just as he had every other time, Hoy bounced off the glass and lauded the window's strength. Unfortunately, Hoy's second window body slam of the day wasn't as successful as the first. It happened in an instant, but it left a lasting impression on everyone in the room. Gary Hoy ran full force at the window, but this time he didn't bounce off. The glass stayed intact, but it popped out of its frame, sending Hoy falling to his death 24 floors below. Ironically, Hoy proved his point. The glass itself was incredibly strong. The same just couldn't be said for the window frame. 5. Timothy Treadwell, the grizzly man, who was mauled to death by grizzly bears. Timothy Treadwell devoted his life to grizzly bears, until they ate him. Timothy Treadwell and his girlfriend Amy Huguenot were mauled to death by a grizzly bear, and the whole attack was caught on tape. Ever since humans emerged as the dominant species, separated from animals by a few short links in the evolutionary chain, they've been trying to prove that they aren't all that different. That the difference between man and beast is only appearance, and that deep down we are really all animals. In a world of animal anthropomorphism, there have been those who have blurred the line between man and beast and ended up serving as a cautionary tale. Roy Horn and Montcourt, the white tiger who mauled him on stage. Bruno Zender, who froze to death while living amongst the penguins in Antarctica. Steve Irwin, killed by a stingray as he was filming them for a documentary. However, none quite measure up to the impact made by the death of Timothy Treadwell, who lived and died amongst the wild grizzly bears of Alaska. Known as the Grizzly Man, Timothy Treadwell was, above all else, a bear enthusiast. His passion for the creatures led him to a passion for environmentalism and documentary filmmaking, the subject of which was the grizzly bears of Katmai National Park in Alaska. Beginning in the late 1980s, Treadwell began summering in Alaska. For 13 summers in a row, he would camp along the Katmai coast, an area of Alaska well known for its large grizzly bear population. During the early part of the summers, he would stay on the Big Green, a grassy area on Hello Bay. Later, he'd move south to Kafla Bay, an area with thick brush. Big Green was good for sighting bears as the grass was low and visibility was clear. Treadwell called it the Grizzly Sanctuary, since it was where they came to rest and mosey around the coast. The Kafla Bay area, thicker and more densely wooded, was better for getting in close contact with the bears. Referred to as the Grizzly Maze, the area was full of intersecting grizzly trails and was much easier to hide in. While camping, Treadwell would get up close and personal with the bears, and film all of the interactions on his video camera. Some of the videos even showed him touching the bears and playing with cubs. While the grizzly man claimed he was always careful to develop a sense of trust and mutual respect, there were many who thought otherwise. Over his 13 summers, Timothy Treadwell made quite a name for himself. Park rangers and the National Park Service warned Treadwell that his relationship with the bears would inevitably turn deadly. Not only were the bears enormous, weighing up to 1,000 pounds and standing taller than a man when up on their hind legs, they felt he was interfering with the natural order of the parks. In 1998, they issued him a citation for carrying food in a tent, a known attractant of bears, along with several other infractions for illegal camping practices. They even imposed a new rule due to his inability to follow their other ones, known as the Treadwell rule. It states that all campers must move their camps at least 1 mile every 5 days in order to keep the bears from getting too comfortable with humans. However, despite the warnings, Treadwell continued to camp and interact with the bears. Within several years, his insistence on maintaining close contact with them would lead to his gruesome and horrifying downfall. In October of 2003, the bear enthusiast and his girlfriend Amy Huguenot were in Katmai National Park near Treadwell's old stomping grounds in the Grizzly Maze. Though it was past the time when he usually packed up for the season, he had decided to extend his stay to locate a favorite female bear of his. Around this time, friends and family say he had withdrawn from the modern world, and even Treadwell admitted he felt far more comfortable in nature with the bears than he ever did with humans. He was getting increasingly reckless. He knew that October was when bears were storing up food for the winter, gaining fat for hibernation, and increasing aggression, yet he still camped out in their paths. This was especially dangerous as park visitors are prohibited from bringing guns, and Treadwell was not carrying bear repellent spray. On the afternoon of October 5th, Treadwell and Huguenot checked in with a colleague in Malibu by satellite phone. Then, just 24 hours later on October 6, 2003, both campers were discovered dead, torn apart by a bear. Timothy Treadwell and Amy Huguenot's remains were discovered by their air taxi pilot, who had arrived at their campsite to pick them up. At first, the campsite seemed abandoned. Then, the pilot noticed the bear, stalking the area as if guarding his prey. The air taxi pilot quickly alerted park rangers who arrived and searched the area. They found the couple's remains quickly. Treadwell's mangled head, part of his spine, his right forearm, and his hand were recovered a short distance from the camp. His wristwatch was still attached to his arm and still ticking. Amy Huguenot's remains were found partially buried under a mound of twigs and dirt next to the torn tents. The park rangers were forced to kill the bear as it attempted to attack them as they recovered the remains. Another younger bear was also killed when it charged the recovery team. A necropsy of the larger bear revealed human body parts in its abdomen, confirming the rangers' fears. Timothy Treadwell and his girlfriend had been eaten by his beloved bears. In the park's 85-year history, this was the first known bear-inflicted death. As the bodies were taken to the morgue, the rangers searched the couple's tents and belongings. Inside one of the torn tents was a video camera with a 6-minute tape inside. At first, it appeared that the tape was blank, as there was no video. However, the tape was not blank. Though the video was dark, as the result of the camera being in a bag or having the lens cap on, the audio was crystal clear. For 6 agonizing minutes, the camera captured the end of Huguenot and Treadwell's lives, recording the sound of their screams as a bear ripped them apart. The audio suggests that the video was turned on moments before the attack and that Treadwell was attacked first while Amy Huguenot attempted to fend the bear off. The audio ends with Huguenot's horrified screams as she is killed. The audio cut off after 6 minutes when the tape ran out, but those 6 minutes were traumatizing enough. After the rangers collected it, they refused to share it with anyone, keeping it from the public despite several filmmakers' attempts to get their hands on it. According to those who have heard it, it leaves a harrowing impression. After Timothy Treadwell's death, park rangers made it clear that while this was a rare incident, it serves as a reminder that bears are deadly animals.